Thank you so much, and welcome to this conversation that we're excited to have for all of you, joined by a really great group of folks here that are experts in the conversation about income share agreements and where we're going from here and the future and so forth. And so first, I'll just briefly introduce them. We have Peter Kallstrom, the president and CEO of the San Diego Workforce Partnership. We have Claire Periscandolo, who is a student in that program and can talk about that experience. And then Rick Buckingham, the VP of Corporate Development from the Strata Education Network. First, to all of you, thanks so much for joining us for this conversation. Peter, I'd love to start with you if it's all right. And just, you were one of the first to set up really a prominent income share agreement in the country. Can you just tell us what the Workforce ISA Fund is, who is involved, and why this was actually started from the perspective of the opportunity and problem that you were trying to solve?
Yeah, thank you, Michael, and great to be with you, and you as a moderator too, and your great experience and background and education. Look forward to hearing more from you. In the workforce development field, we have 550 boards across the country who deliver a variety of workforce services, primarily through federal funding and then a mix of other dollars. Those dollars have only gone down in the last 20 years, almost by 50%. So there's not enough training dollars there to be able to support the need in our communities. And recognizing that, a couple of years ago, when we learned of the ISA model, we decided to launch it at the San Diego Workforce Partnership. And so easier said than done, because it takes philanthropic investment and other dollars in order to even have a fund. And thanks to Strata for being our first investor, and they awarded us a grant that was then matched by the James Irvine Foundation and then other investors. And we've built up a pool of about $4 million that allows us then to create the program. Our education partner is UCSD Extension, a very notable institution in town and across the country. And together we designed our first cohort in IT related sectors. So we had 4 different disciplines. All of these are 9 to 12 month long certificate programs. And then upon completion, the graduate, we help with placement. And then once they make at least $40,000 a year, they pay back to the fund a small percentage of future income for a limited period of time, and then they're done. So this addresses the student loan crisis, number one, and also the lack of enough funding to deliver workforce training. And we're off and running. We've completed our first cohort. We've enrolled our second, and we look forward to growing the program in years to come. And we are the only one in the public workforce system to do this. So we want to refine it and then help our colleagues learn from it and deploy it elsewhere.
Yeah, that's something I'd love to get into a little bit more, because you've been at the vanguard of this, as I mentioned, particularly in your sector, and thinking about how this spreads, I think, is going to be an important topic. Claire, I'd love to turn to you next. I love panels when we actually get to talk to people who experience the program itself, because you can give us that firsthand account. And so I'd love you first give us a sense of how you learned of this opportunity and why this pathway, and like particularly, how did you think about the income share agreement portion of it? Because an ISA is something that we love to geek out in the education industry on, but it's not necessarily something that is popularly known, I think, outside of the industry, so to speak. So Claire, I'd love to get your take about how you learned about this and educated yourself and made the decision.
Absolutely. And now, after being a participant, I'm kind of geeking out about it as well. So it is kind of contagious in that way. So I've been making a documentary for the last several years, and I needed to learn, what am I going to do with this film after I finish it? How do I build a brand? How do I get people to know about it? And so I was lamenting one day to a friend who is also a filmmaker and in the middle of a career change, about the marketing, and that we just didn't know anything about it. And about a week later, he sends me a link to the San Diego Workforce Partnership ISA with a digital marketing certificate. And so I didn't know what it was. I clicked on it. I started reading. I was like, oh, digital marketing. That's just exactly what we were talking about. And then I was like, what's an ISA? what does this mean? How much is this? Because, all good things have a price tag. What is that price tag? And as I started going through the website and I read every word I could find about it, I really was like, are you serious? Is this how this works? I don't have to like pay up front for it because I don't have anything in savings right now. That would be amazing. And so I jumped right in, both feet, with all enthusiasm, and then walked down the hall to my 21-year-old son in the room, knocked on the doors like, hey, I sent you a link, wake up, apply to that. And then he came back to me and was like, hey, Mom, so I think this is a scam, and I think they're just fishing for your social. And that's kind of was his take on it. And then we like talked about it. What a percentage after you reach this cap of 40,000. Oh, okay. Well, so I don't put any money up front. Well, what did they get out of it? We had to have all of these conversations to even get him to, like, okay, fine. If you say so, I'm going to apply. And he did, and he got in the same program as I did before I did. So then we were able to go through the program together, and we're on the other side now. We've gotten our certificates, and so we're in the looking for job placement portion of that. And I think that's something.
Internship right now as well.
Yes. We are in internships. We're both in our internships, which is helping us, really take all of these skills that we've been taught and bring them to the real world and seeing how that functions, where that goes, how prepared are we for this? And turns out we're pretty darn prepared, which is really great on the other side of that. So
that's awesome. I just double click quickly on one thing you said, Claire, before I turn to you, Rick, which is you mentioned, nothing up front felt great about the ISA.
Yes.
Debt has that characteristic as well. From your perspective, what was it that was sufficiently different about this from debt that said, oh yeah, this is a better option? Or how did you think, or were you scared about it because it felt like maybe it could be a form of debt?
It actually felt a lot more comfortable than looking at the word debt. Debt is terrifying. And especially when you're talking about student debt, that was one of my son's biggest things about college is he was like, I don't necessarily want to go that route because I don't want to take on all the student debt. And so that's kind of a bad word in the house. And so when I looked at the ISA, it's not a program that's like, hey, you're in debt. It's hey, we're going to help you. We're going to educate you. And then we're going to wrap you around with all of these services to help you move to get a career, to get a job, to get a place where you can advance, a place, just a starting point. And then once you're doing that, then you start paying us back. And if something happens, you can pause that payment. And that peace of mind was why I could go, yeah, all right, let's do that. I have 4 kids. If something happens, I can pause it. Oh my heavens. That was like the best. So it felt very comfortable. It did seem too good to be true. That was, that's the one thing my son was saying. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not. He said so. So.
No, that's incredibly helpful. And you saying that debt is a 4-letter word in your household brings briefly to mind one of my 6-year-old daughters persuaded me that she had enough money to buy something at a store when used to go shopping at stores. And I bought it for her only to find out when we came back that she didn't. So she went into debt on the allowance for the next 8 weeks and was mortified by this. And my wife said, good, she won't do that again. So turning to you, Rick, I'm curious, put this in like a greater context, right? Strata got interested in income share agreements. You're obviously connected to this workforce ISA fund, but how do you see this broader opportunity for ISAs, or I've taken to calling them renewable learning funds in effect? What's Strata's interest in this, and where do you see this movement going right now?
Yeah, exactly, Michael, and thanks to the other panelists too, because it's been, insightful conversation so far. But the problem out there, and none of this is going to be new to you guys or the panelists, is like, you have a $1.6 trillion debt issue out there. You've got 44 plus million working adults with some education but no degree. And when you poll those folks and find out what's the main reason why you didn't complete your education, it's always finances. So Strata, we became interested in the ISA space probably in the early teens of this decade. And we funded some grant research into the space just to see, the landscape that's out there and how an ISA model might be constructed. And from there, we've moved into some, how I'd characterize it is piloting of several different types of ISA plans and structures. Again, I don't know if there's a one size fits all or what have you, but there are lots of different flavors out there in the market today, and we believe a lot of them are very good. And we have through grant process or through some investments in some of the companies that are doing that, or funds that are rolling out ISAs, just because we don't know what the silver bullet is out there, or if there is a silver bullet. But we believe in the fact that there is an alternative to the student loan debt crisis that's out there, and we think ISAs might play a big role in that piece. For now, obviously Stafford student loans are a very good deal for students. It's when you have to get into the private debt markets, or even grad plus or parent plus loans, that it's not ideal for the parents and the students themselves in most cases. And even in those programs, there's concerns about over borrowing just because people rely on, some income driven repayment plans that they think is going to take care of everything. So, an ISA can, certainly address and bring into play a little more normalcy to the cost process of the education, we hope, down the road. There's a lot of different things that can play out, and a lot of different levers that can push the returns on for investors and that kind of thing. And certainly what Strata is most concerned about is keeping students first and foremost, and making sure that they're getting the best bang for their buck. We're a big fan of ISAs in the fact that they do have that downside protection, versus a loan. A loan is with you until it's paid off. You have that obligation, and very few will likely ever get the benefit of a forgiveness period from an income-driven repayment plan, because they're so long at this point in time, and the window for an ISA repayment is much shorter. But again, we are very much concerned about making sure that it's responsibly rolled out, and that students are first, as I mentioned, and that returns are adequate to bring in private capital in the market, but not so much that it skews towards a profit mode versus an altruistic mode, which is what we ultimately hope will happen in the ISA space.
I want to double click on that in a moment, but first I want to zoom in, I guess, on the workforce ISA in San Diego specifically. And have you all comment on this, actually, about what are we learning so far? You mentioned, Peter, you're kicking off the second cohort. You're starting to expand the fund into other verticals, other disciplines. What are we learning so far about how it works, for whom it works? It can go any number of directions, but conclusions that you've reached as this has been operational.
Yeah, we've learned a lot in a short amount of time, and adjusted to. I want to go back to what Rick said right there around the for-profit motive and what the ISA providers are in it for. I think part of what makes ours really unique, and I think long-lasting and very successful, is we're a nonprofit. We have zero motive other than making this work, and all of the funds that go back into the fund are secure and safe. I don't get a bonus. Nobody gets a bonus if we do well or hit different metrics. This is all about providing skills to people to help them along in their career. And that's really critical when you have the student at the center of all that's going on, instead of making a buck. And so the cost is low to go through, is around $6,500 roughly, depending upon the discipline and the length of the course. Payback is no more than 1.8 that cost, and that goes all back into the fund. That pays for the support and the staff and just the fund itself. And then the fund goes is evergreen and will be renewable, as you point out. The other thing that we've done in order to protect the fund in the most robust way is we've separated out the fund part into a separate 501c3 now that we call Workforce Ventures. This keeps all of the funds separate from being mingled with the other dollars that we work with in the workforce space. So we work with Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act dollars to the federal government and the state, county, city, private sector. So none of that is touched within the ISA fund. So it's very pure and controlled, and keeps it safe. We have a separate advisory board and led by my colleague Brooke Valle, who you may know, who heads that up and is also our internal chief strategy officer. So it's a very protected fund. So we really made sure that was the case instead of it getting conflicted in any way. And as far as other delivery learnings, we've modified coursework with extension to see what's really working, what the employers are looking for, really having very honed curriculum that's really in demand. That's in all that really matters in the end. Because if right now employers and our new economy is employers are going to hire for skills. They're not always going to look for that 4-year degree or 2 or post 4-year degree. If we can provide the right skill set that are in demand, like Claire's going through right now, that's what the employer needs to hire for, not the whole scope of a computer science degree or something else. But when Claire can do that and her son and add value to the employer, that's the whole purpose and point of what we're focusing on. So we're refining as we go, but those are some of the learnings early on.
Yeah, I
I'd
definitely.
love your take as well. Yeah, go for it.
I was going to say, I have been a part of that a little bit, and I feel very grateful to have been a part of that, being in the first cohort, going through, the program itself, dealing with all of the instructors and the support team through Workforce has been amazing. And as Peter said, everything's very protected. I think that really comes across as a student. I felt very protected. I still feel very protected and in a very soft bubble, which is lovely. Because, school is a stressor for a lot of people. Learning, anything new is very difficult. And to do that with minimal stress has been such a gift. And it really has been, there's such a support team. Matt Roman is always there. I call him my career guy. And I will Slack or send an email or just be like, hey, can we do a call today? And he is right there to help. Alistair Penny has been absolutely instrumental in all of, he is, I don't know how many times I've bugged him, and he always has time to, answer the question or help. I know my son's car broke down and it was transmission and we needed help. And so I was like, hey, is there any way we can get a bus pass or something? And we did. Like, that was, Alistair dropped it in the mail, and then we had a bus pass for as long as we needed it, just a couple of weeks to get through. But I have several certificates. I have one in medical administrative assisting. I have one as an optician. I can take all your glasses measurements if you need. But so I've done these programs before, and I have never felt the support that came with this cohort and this whole experience. And if that is what is building in an ISA, this is a student-centric program. Right? We're going to take care of the student and then let that student bloom and go out into the world and make a difference in the way that they now know how. What it does is it takes away the gatekeeping of that finance. I was a stay-at-home mom for 11 and a half years. Trying to walk into the job force after that doesn't work, right? All of my skills pre-kids were outdated. And so, I took time off again to have another one. So 5 years later, again, all of my skills were outdated. This was a way that did not put a strain on my family immediately, and that I could learn, I could get the job, and then start paying it back. There was no upfront, and then I didn't worry because look, all of a sudden I have this resume help. I didn't know how, I knew how high school write a resume. I didn't know how that game had changed or anything. So, there's all of the support that comes. And I think in this last year learning, maybe we should do the resumes earlier in the process because that's kind of stressful, as well as you're trying to do finals. And, maybe there should be portfolio website. So you're picking out all of these things and you're having something there. There's all of these ways that, I was able to come in and say, hey, this is what I would have found helpful. And now that's shaping the way that the next cohort's going through. And that's been a really cool experience to see that.
I could just emphasize one thing that Claire points out there that's so key to our model and what we believe in is our tagline is, it's not alone and you're not alone. The team there is really crucial. So Claire and all the participants have real live human beings to talk to who are going to support her with whatever's needed to succeed. And we're just as responsible for the success as anyone. And we'll do whatever to help our participants navigate all the way through and to have whatever's necessary to make it. So that support system, I think, might be unique in this space because I don't know the other models, but if it's just a purely ISA financial model, then you just maybe have a lower cost of entry and then you have the payback. But in our case, we're going to support the team all the way through.
Right.
And help with placement and internships. So it's a full service approach. It's not go get your certificate and pay us back. We're opening up the door for the internships, and we have an internal business services team that is working with hundreds of employers in our region every day to open up more doors. And then we market it and spread the word, and that's how you help folks find their dream job.
Yeah, and Peter, to your point exactly, and that is, why ISAs can be attractive as well, because investors in the ISA space have a vested interest in making sure that the students that go through the programs that receive the ISA funds succeed. So that's one of the best parts about what we think an ISA can serve in the market, is that it drives up the quality of the education that's being offered to the students. And it connects students to good paying jobs. And there's people along the way that support group that they're not necessarily going to be able to get from a university experience. And that's not a slam on universities per se. It's just, you have more people invested in that student success. I think it's ultimately going to create a win-win for the students themselves, the schools they go to, the employers that are hiring them, and so forth. And to carry on to that point, I mean, number of the sessions that I've seen so far in the ASV or ASU GSV series here is that the cost of the college education is coming into question on whether that is worth it to the students. And and it's not just the cost of it. It's, Claire, you talked about this, how quickly your skill set can become outdated in a rapidly advancing technology age that we have. So there's that need for skilling folks, not in a 4-year setting, but in shorter term programs. And one of the things that ISAs can do that typically student loans cannot do, at least federal student loans, is short-term programs or coding boot camps or what have you are just not eligible for Title IV financial assistance. So the federal student loan Pell Grants are not available to that population. So that's where, ISAs can certainly fill a major gap there that is existing today. And again, it's whether or not, a 4-year degree is worth it. I mean, and certainly I have one, so I'm a little biased that yes, it is worth it. But I can tell you it's been several years since I've done that, and the need to reskill myself is probably there. And I would certainly not want to go back for another 4-year degree. So having the opportunity to, get credentials or what have you that are available is a great thing, that a space where ISAs could fill. So.
No, it's incredibly helpful. And I'll take the bait that Peter laid out in the beginning, and I'll opine a little bit as well, which is to say, just a theory that I've long held is that higher education is underinvested in the career services and placement part of the equation for students. The average career services office in higher education, so just to go to the college conversation for a moment, is under $100,000 total budget, right?
Wow.
Once you have an ISA in here, you've aligned incentives to create the sort of support infrastructure, Claire, that you were just describing, where we're going to do whatever it takes to make sure that you have a great experience, you complete, you do things that actually will align with employer need. And to Peter, your point, create a set of program offerings, marketing activities, et cetera, that align all of this together, which is tremendous, I think. So it segues to the question, though, that I'm dying to ask all of you, and Rick, maybe you go first here, and then everyone jump in, which is, why isn't this spreading faster? Like, we're hearing a lot of positives right now. What's holding it back? Policy is obviously one of them, but there are a lot of people who push back on this and say debt is actually a better deal and things of that nature. What's holding this back?
Yeah, first and foremost, I do think a lot of potential investors are sitting back until they get some comfort around a regulatory federal legislative framework that will help provide the comfort that they need personally from their perspectives in order to really ramp up the funding for ISAs going forward. I think there's still some concern too about whether or not certainly we're talking about in today's environment with COVID and the unemployment rate and all that and the repayment. I think you're going to see some lag effect there as well to find out where we come on the other side of that. But I think the number one concern right now is where we're legislative framework. And, I think folks, we have an election coming around the corner that could either expedite or it could slow it down even further. And so I think that's the number one reason of why you haven't seen it take off as quickly as what some of us thought it would.
We just get super specific on, because I think a lot of people keep hearing that policy is the barrier. Part of this is defining what an ISA actually is, and then what is inbounds and out of bounds. Is that the main nature of the conversation right now, or are there other policy considerations that we're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, for one, I mean, when you start talking about the number one thing is that you hear out there is the potential for usury in an ISA space, and frankly, and this is my opinion only, there can be some safeguards put into place for that, but when you talk about a repayment cap and whatever that multiple is, a lot of folks get hung up on the fact that someone who could borrow 20,000, or I shouldn't say borrow, should get 20,000 in ISA funds, may end up paying, $50,000 back, and they may do that in a very short period of time. What some folks don't really realize is that in order to make that cap come into play, the student has to be very successful in their career transition that they went to. So we all need to step back and look at a holistic approach on how it's structured and who it does, because also that person that's paying that $50,000 for the $20,000 in funds that they received is subsidizing the person that did not make it. And so that they got that same $20,000, they may not pay a dime back. So in all, when you look at it as a whole, it's a social program. Not everybody's going to win, but hopefully those that do win can help subsidize those that don't succeed as well as they did. So that's one thing I think that's a little of a misnomer when you talk about the policy piece on it. But obviously, again, Claire talked about it, Peter talked about it. Students must come first. I mean, that's what we want to see in there. And we can't have excessive returns from the investors themselves, expecting the kind of returns that you might get in other types of investments that you make. We need to invest in our future of the students that are pursuing higher education and the upward mobility of their career path.
Yeah, I agree with all of Rick's points, really well stated. And boy, we welcome that legislation, and we weighed in on it when it was floating around in DC, because it's all about student protection. And if you can have the right guardrails in there, we're all good, and we want that. So another piece of why it's hard to make a program from scratch, and it's really not the norm within workforce development at all, because that whole field is different with being able to deploy the federal resources and other funds that you may work with. This is completely novel, and so we could have wanted to do it, but without the generosity of Strata as our first believer and funder, we'd still just be talking about the ideas. So you got to be able to raise the funds, and so we worked closely with Strata. They had to believe in us, and it was a very competitive bid. I think there were only 8 grantees in different spaces out of 300 plus applicants. So it's hard. You got to be very competitive. And then we've got this great relationship with the James Irvine Foundation, who's funded us for several years in other work, and they believed in the concept, and off we went. So being able to do that, you got to be able to raise the funds. You got to have a great education partner, as we do in UCSD Extension. And then you've got to have a great internal team who can build the infrastructure through an easy online application system and a vetting and a support team that we've built up. So you gotta work hard to be able to make this happen. And work is hard, and not everybody wants to lean into something brand new and give it a go, because we're risking all that we do and our reputation, but we believe in it so much that we're willing to do it. We know this is a great avenue for students to get the skills necessary to get really good paying positions and move into whatever they want to work in.
Yeah, no, I just want to jump in real quickly. And again, I don't think Peter has taken enough credit for what San Diego Workforce Partners has done with the employers in the community, as far as seeing what they needed and then matching programs and coming up with those programs to meet the employers' needs that are there. And that is certainly, I think, the biggest win that we saw in partnering with the commission there is that it does have that tie together, and that's what needs to happen in order to provide the better pathway for all.
I want you to answer this question as well before we have some questions from the audience coming in, but I'd love you to, from your perspective as a student, what do you think is holding this back from becoming something more widespread that other students would take advantage of? And I'm curious also, Rick's point, like, if you're super successful out of this, you're going to be paying more than maybe you would have in a different vehicle. You must have thought that through as you and your son were vetting this. So how have you thought that? Like, how does that ring? Yeah. So answer. I guess it's two questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Rick was talking about it, I was like, oh wait, me. Yeah. So that's the thing is, there is a cap, and that cap might be more than, somebody else who can pay it back, or if they can, and after going through it, when I first sat down and I was like, okay, let's talk about this. This is the cap. This was the max. Of course, my husband and I had to have the financial conversation, and we're like, okay, here's a cap. So this is what it could be. And if I want to pay it off real fast, this is how much I would pay. And then, this is how much it would be. If I get a job making $40,000, this is what it starts. And we did all that math. And then that seemed like, okay, well, that's fine. I think that this education that I'm getting, this skill set, is worth the cap. So sure, I'll just jump in if I have to, pay that, that's fine. But after going through it, after actually participating, it's like, I really, really, really hope I have to pay the cap back, because that means I'm really successful on my end. That means I'm doing really, really well. And what I'm putting back is not only the funds that were used to help me and to help others, but then I'm putting back that enthusiasm. I can come back as a mentor. I can help. I'm going to be putting back more than they gave me no matter what, because this program is that good. Like, I really have enjoyed it that much. I have felt like everything I've invested time-wise, and having to give up, fun game nights and things like that because I had assignments to do, all of that's been absolutely worth it. And I want to help somebody else who's been in my position. And why I don't think it's gone and launched as, nobody knows about it. When I start talking about it, none of my peers understood what this was. I've had to explain it to absolutely everyone. And then they go, oh, wow, do they have it for XYZ? And I'm like, not yet, but we're getting there. We're not there yet, but we really want to be there. They're working on new disciplines. They're working on healthcare. They're working on this. So it's just not widely enough available. I know, speaking from that stay-at-home mom position, being able to do this program, I could have done this at home. It would have been difficult. Of course, I would have needed support from my family as well. But again, that ISA cohort is, you're not in it alone at all. And so because you have so much support, I could have absolutely done this and started fortunately, with the COVID age, I work remotely, and that's wonderful. My son works remotely. And as far as, are we finding jobs? Yeah, we're still finding people hiring for what we're doing. So that also helps, because now I can still work and make sure my kids are going to school and making sure my kids get a snack and doing my work. And I could have done that going to school. And I think if we just like get all the house stay-at-home parents together and is like, hey, this could be in a year that you could be working and then you would be paying this back. Oh, I think we'd have a force like we haven't had before.
It's really profound points. That's and a very helpful framing, frankly, Claire. I want to go to the audience questions that are coming in. I'm going to go first to this question that is the question that I would have asked next, which is, so it's really my question, but the pandemic, recession, and the impact of the labor market and hiring, how has that affected the viability of ISAs in terms of their attractiveness to schools and financiers? Rick, maybe you jump in first, but Peter, you're probably seeing this firsthand as well.
Yeah, well, and I think there probably remains to be seen how big of an impact it will have down the road, but certainly with those that have lost their jobs, there's going to be that need to upskill and meet whatever the employer might need for future roles that they have within their organization to fill. And so I think there's going to be a need for short-term type credentialing programs, or what Peter's doing in the San Diego Workforce Partnership Commission, where it is shorter term programs, and most of those are not going to be Title IV eligible for federal student assistance. So there's going to be a need, obviously, for someone to fill that gap, and that's where ISAs could certainly come into play. Even ISAs today that have been rolled out, I mean, we're still relatively nascent in the ISA process themselves. So there's not a whole lot of repayment data on there, but from what I've seen of the folks that do receive them, they're very vested in the school that provides that opportunity, or the program that provides that opportunity, and they want to do exactly what Claire's saying. They want to pay it forward for future generations because they see the opportunity it gave them. So that's the thing that makes me most excited about it. The pandemic aside, I mean, I think it can be a catalyst for change. So as bad as it is from the unemployment side, it could be equally good coming down on the other side as a change agent for what we need going forward.
Yeah, there's been a lot of interest locally, even with COVID hitting and our first cohort graduating during that. It's not discouraged us at all, because there's going to be more and more remote work in demand in the future for sure. And the positions that we're being able to help train folks for will fit well with the future economy. And so our other institutions locally have really been interested. We've put out an RFP to look at other partners beyond extension. We love them, we're going to stay with them, but we want to have more to work with. And so we look forward to probably launching with a couple of new entities in the coming year. And there's no lack of interest in signing up for this. And I really applaud Claire for her buyer beware approach to this too, and reading the fine print, because not all ISAs are alike, and we are, but other ISAs could be usurious, to Rick's point, and be very careful what you're signing up for. And good ISAs with a good support team will lead to the outcomes that you want. But we're very bullish on this, again, because we need to retrain our community to get these new jobs in the future, and got to do it affordably. And this is the method to do it. The workforce funds in the public workforce system won't cut it. They're very limited. They've gone down so much, and we can't rely on that. And they may go down further because there's just not enough public money to go around as it is. And again, I do want to thank Strata so much for believing in us, because they invested in an idea without any data to back it up that we could pull this off. And that's a great leap of faith. And we need more investors in the community who kick the tires of whoever they're looking at carefully, and then they pick, and then they work closely with us to make sure that this is gonna work. And that's what's gonna make this grow. Claire, 2 years ago, I didn't know what an ISA was either. And so it's little known in our community still, but once we got it off the ground and we explained it to the community and put up on our website and share it via media, the interest was great. In our first cohort application, we had over 500 applications for 80 spots. So there's no lack of interest. It's now a matter of how can we scale this and make this very affordable, number one, have great outcomes, have more education partners, more verticals to work within, that's where we're going to go. So our goal, we're at about a $4 million mark now for our seed fund. We want to grow that to about 25 million by 2025 through repayment, through new investors. When we do that, we can have hundreds of people go through ISAs on a regular basis.